Well, good morning. Oh, I like that. That is fun, Ruth Ann. I'm Beth Clark from Penn State University, and as about 10 minutes ago, I'm your new Vice President for Professional Development. Thank you. Welcome to the second day of APA 2018's annual meeting and exposition. Are you guys having fun so far? Excellent. I trust you all enjoyed last night's awards reception. It was a wonderful event where we honor and congratulate our colleagues and peers, all of whom bring so much to the APA organization and our profession. We'd like to take a moment before we begin this morning to revisit the video of one of our newest Award for Excellence winners. This video celebrates the outstanding commitment to facilities and student success found at Montclair State University.
Building on its distinguished history dating back to 1908, Montclair State University is a leading institution of higher education in New Jersey. Designated a research doctoral university by the Carnegie Classification of Institutions of Higher Education, the university's 11 colleges and schools serve more than 21,000 undergraduate and graduate students, with more than 300 doctoral, master's, and baccalaureate programs.
Situated on a beautiful 252-acre suburban campus just 12 miles from New York City, Montclair State delivers instructional and research resources of a large public university in a supportive, sophisticated, and diverse academic environment.
The university recruits faculty with exceptional academic or professional credentials and a deep commitment to the pursuit of their development as teachers and scholars. The university admits students who have demonstrated the potential for high achievement, diligence in the pursuit of their education, and high aspirations for using their education. The university is committed to the maintenance of a learning community that is deeply and broadly reflective of the diverse population of New Jersey.
Our team is comprised of 333 professional and skilled workers who are responsible for the 24/7, 365-day operations of the university's 252-acre campus. As a support organization, we are committed to delivering exceptional service to Montclair State University students, faculty, staff, and visitors in facilities maintenance and engineering, facilities logistics, facility services, and environmental health and safety.
Facilities human resources, fire safety, energy management.
Facilities financial management, capital planning and project management, facilities learning and development. In university facilities, our employees are our most valuable asset. As the face of this division, our staff serve as university ambassadors, providing first-line customer service and serving as a knowledgeable source of information for faculty, staff, students, and visitors. We represent the high standards to which our organization aspires. Our work impacts the experience of every student and employee at Montclair State University, a responsibility that we hold in high regard.
Facility Services handles approximately 600,000 pieces of ingoing and outgoing mail and 75,000 packages per year. Additionally, they keep the campus running in the event of snow, which happens quite often here in New Jersey. Sometimes staff is here 36 to 48 hours just to be sure that campus is safe.
The primary objective of Montclair State University Facilities Logistics Support is getting people around campus safe and in a timely fashion. Approximately 46 full-time employees, including 20 full-time drivers, maintain parking, transportation, fleet services, facilities IT support, and an inventory of more than 500 pieces of equipment.
Capital planning and project management is responsible for planning, designing, and construction of all facilities on campus. Currently, we support over 250 projects with total value near $400 million that consist of smaller jobs like a hot water heater replacement project to a much larger job like the renovation of our oldest, most iconic building, College Hall. In addition to the focus on the customer, we pride ourselves on completing our work on time and under budget.
Learning and development is an important part of our culture here in university facilities. It is essential to engage employees and to help them with their professional development. Facilities learning and development services include training programs, staff acclimation, engagement and onboarding, career development programs, ESL and literacy education, the learning management system, certificate programs, performance management support, division-wide town hall meetings, employee recognition and appreciation, staff retreats, and community outreach.
The 68 employees who comprise the facilities maintenance and engineering department are responsible for building maintenance and of repairs in the areas of building automation systems, lock shop, carpentry, electrical, HVAC, masonry, plumbing and repairs, and the customer service center. University Facilities is supplied energy from its 5.6 megawatt combined heat and recovery plant and advanced microgrid. Montclair State University is proud to be the first university in the state of New Jersey that operates a fully automated smart grid.
Congratulations to University Facilities for the APA Award of Excellence. It is well deserved because we have an outstanding division of university facilities. When students see the terrific folks from University Facility working all over this campus, they are learning something important about what it means to work in this world. And as they see University Facilities people taking pride in the work that they do, it helps them understand why they are studying what they're studying and what it means to contribute in this society. Congratulations!
We wanted to make sure we got that video right because they certainly do get it right at Montclair State. Sean, Joanna, congratulations once again. You know, whether it's our people or our best practices or the work of our most accomplished educational institutions, it is APA that sets the benchmark for excellence and leadership in our profession. When you return home from Washington, D.C., take a moment to reflect on how this event and the other training programs APA offers help you make better decisions and address the challenges at your institutions. Take, for example, the APA Institute and the Leadership Academy programs. Both programs are an absolute must for any institution that is serious about professional development for its management team. Together, these two programs draw over 700 professionals each year from our membership. This year's APA-U conference will be held during the week of September 9th through the 13th, right here back in Washington, D.C. Registration is currently open at apa.org on our website. So be sure to register yourselves and your staff, and then go ahead and make those travel arrangements because rooms at the hotel and space in the classrooms are filling quickly. One other quick information item, if you have not already done so, please be sure to visit the APA bookstore and resource centers in the Hall of Resources. The APA staff there is more than eager to answer your questions about APA's many products and services. At this time, I'd like to open this morning's general session by inviting Steve Anson, Vice President for Marketing for Anixter, one of APA's business partners, as our sponsor for the session this morning. Steve?
Welcome all to this morning's general session, which is dealing with the very hot topic of IoT and where the Internet of Things will be taking us. So today, we'll be joined with key industry leaders that are going to explore the challenges of a smart campus, which includes risk management, network performance, student experience, space utilization, all under the umbrella of the Internet of Things. My name is Steve Anson. I'm responsible for vertical markets at Anixter. And Anixter, just so you know, is a global distributor of infrastructure and connectivity solutions that help our customers build, connect, power, and protect their working environments. Joining me on today's panel, we have some very credible industry superstars. Landa Medlin, the super shy introvert, Executive VP of APA. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
We have Eric Backus, Executive Officer and Director, Construction, Engineering, and Management at Clarkson University. Next, we have Deb Nola, my mate from down under, CEO of Switch Automation, a leading IoT software company. And last but not least, we have Andrew Jimenez, VP of Technology at Anixter. So thank you for those that attended the Anixter welcome reception on Thursday and casting your vote on what your campus priorities are. As promised, here are the results. So network and IoT came in at approximately 61 votes. Project deployment, also very important, with 78 votes. Space utilization, 85. Risk management, 100. And as we expect, student experience at 128.
Yeah.
So, starting with the first topic of risk management with 100 votes. A big topic here is emergency preparedness, and as this statistic highlights, a number of universities do not feel fully prepared in the event of an emergency. So I'd like to start my first question to Landa. How do universities approach managing risk in a campus setting today?
Well, one thing I want to identify, you know me, we're always making sure you know the resources that are available, is that APA actually produced a Thought Leaders series through a symposium on managing and mitigating risk. We presented this to the senior facilities officers at their summit on Thursday, but it was available yesterday, and everyone should have a copy of this. So it's a really good piece. But risks are covering the gamut. They're not just physical, they're virtual, across 5 different constructs of operational, financial, technological, strategic, and yes, reputational. Reputational is really important, and frankly, the core of what every one of you do in facilities management is around mitigating risk and managing risk. You really have to pay attention to the risks that occur. And some of the challenges, Steve, besides the obvious natural disasters, which you need to be prepared for, it's mitigating violence. Yesterday, we had a fantastic opening session speaking to active shooters, and the issues around that. We're attempting to create safe and secure environments, not only for our students, but our faculty, as workplaces, developing proactive strategies for security, maintaining 24/7, 365. I think I heard that in Montclair's Award for Excellence comments. They said, we are 24/7, 365, and all of you would agree with that. However, I want you to think about increasing your presence at your institutions with its ERM, its enterprise risk management policies and processes. They are to be strategic and integrated. That requires emergency preparedness planning, procedures, and practice. What did they say yesterday? Drills, right? What did they say at one election platform? Drill, baby, drill. I don't think that's what they were talking about yesterday. However, drills are really, really important. Using technology for early notification, using the data to make more effective decision-making, which has been disparate. I'm telling you, with big data and predictive analytics, we have opportunities that we never saw before. I think Don mentioned that today when he was talking about the age of accelerations. And finally, effective collaboration. How well do we collaborate across the campus, across all of our stakeholders, and to the external communities? And that's going to be another really big part of this.
Right. So Eric, what are some of these strategies we can employ on campus from your point of view?
Well, there's numbers of them, and some of them aren't new at all. Like, for instance, we could take CPTED, right? People have heard about that. So crime prevention through environmental design. Well, just kind of step back a minute and see, are there solutions I can do to help me solve that? But while you're doing crime prevention, you could also be looking at how resilient the institution is. So having the ability to have it so during a storm event, you're not having a stormwater issue because you've also built into that infrastructure the capability to deal with those issues while you're solving a crime problem. But also, I think to the point that Lander just brought up with regards to collaboration, you don't have to do it on your own. There are partners, whether they be our corporate partners, like Anixter here today, who's sponsoring this panel, or our neighboring communities, or just the people named students that are on our campus. These are all resources we can use and employ to help solve these problems if we start thinking about risk management in a perspective of all things that we have to deal with within the institution.
Excellent. So Andy, then, from an industry point of view, what are some of the other best practices when you could advise the room on that we see out there?
Well, carrying on with what Eric said with SEPTED, there's something called defense in depth, which is really just kind of a natural evolution of SEPTED. Right. So it's really a multi-layer approach to your risk management or your security plan. So it's the basic premises of it is to deter, detect, delay, defend, and deny too as well. So from just a risk management platform, you just want to be able to do those types of things. So how do you employ defensive depth across a built environment? These are some examples within your security plan. You can look at your campus grounds, your building entrance, your common spaces, your academic areas, student housing, and technical facilities, and overlay kind of this defense in depth approach. So from a detection perspective, we see a lot of like video surveillance. So as we'll get into some of the discussions around the technology, there's new megapixel cameras that can easily detect when things are happening within the environment. You have analytics that can kind of see things that maybe a security guard will miss. You have different visitor management systems, for instance, that can, again, detect and deny individuals from entering a facility. And then if you've got a situation where an actual threat manifests itself, you have to be able to coordinate resources effectively across your facilities to be able to really mitigate that threat. So having integrated and coordinated IT with kind of your first responders and your other responders on the university campuses is really important. So really having kind of this integrated approach, this multi-layer approach is something you want to try and incorporate.
Okay. So Deb, speaking of analytics, what are some of the ways we can be more proactive versus reactive with, say, video surveillance data or access control data?
Yeah, so I like to think about risk as being beyond that. So, Lander talked about brand and reputational risk. So if you look at the way people are managing buildings today, a lot of it is very reactive. You're waiting for a human to notice a problem. You're waiting for a human to report that problem. And that could be anything from, water on the floor that's a slip hazard, right through to, I'm too hot, too cold, which is a brand or a student experience issue, right through to signage that's not lit, which is a branding problem. So it's all about moving from being reactive to proactive. And most people that are managing facilities have dozens of systems that they're already logging into. And there's just too much information, and all of that data is siloed. So it's about integrating those systems and then having an analytics overlay that will bubble those problems up to you as quickly as possible so that you can move into a much more proactive stance.
Okay. So moving on to our next topic of network performance, which had 27 votes. To highlight the performance demands of networks on campus, according to a recent study at EDUCAUSE, nearly 75% of students try to connect now, we've made a little update here, 3 to 4 devices to the campus network at the same time. So Lander, why has the network become so, it's probably obvious, so important today, and how have these demands changed over the years?
Well, I would identify two areas. One is demographics and the other is demands. I mean, when you look at the demographics, think of the student, the Gen Z student, technology is ubiquitous to them. It's anywhere, everywhere, anytime, any place. And it's also the sense that it's a way of life. I was talking to a Gen Z about 2 weeks ago, and he doesn't even think about technology. It's just part of everything he does. And if I handed my iPhone, that was the turning point in 2007 to where we're headed now. If I handed my iPhone to my 4-year-old great-grandchild, yeah, there we are already. There we are. He looks at me and, old grandma, it's old news already. So that's how rapidly things are changing in terms of the demographics and the way in which technology is utilized. I also was on a campus and I looked over, and there was a little cafe area, and there was an umbrella. And I got closer, and I realized that the umbrella had a plug-in, and all the students were plugging in their iPhones or their devices to the umbrella. And I said, wow, we're protected from the cloud and we're connecting to the cloud. Okay, you know, when they say it's all about the cloud. But then, you know, the demands back to Montclair, 24/7, 365. And the energy consumption associated with that, the plug loads, all the rest of it. I mean, the network, they expect, assume. They go to Starbucks, and they're always connected. They come to your institution, they want to have the same experience. So the network's becoming really, really important.
So on that note, speaking about the cloud, Andy, there's a new term, or not a new term, it's been around for quite a while, called the fourth utility. So talk to us about the fourth utility, how that helps with increasing bandwidth and the sheer number of edge devices.
Well, to that point, I mean, data is the fourth utility. You know, data or information across your corporate network, so how you access it, how you use it. So from that point of view, as Lander had pointed out, there's an expectation that this utility is always working. So much like gas, electricity service, water service, always on, always working, highly reliable. So from that perspective, you need to make sure that as you're provisioning your physical layer connectivity across your environment, that it's going to last for one thing, but it's also going to be reliable. And we talked to a lot of customers, and it's difficult to have kind of the foresight. So we're talking about the iPhone back in 2007. We had no expectation this little device could do everything it does today, everything from apps to controlling our lives. And it's hard to predict what the future holds. And from a physical layer perspective, you need to really have that foresight, because you can't be ripping and replacing your physical infrastructure with every iteration of technology. So one of my responsibilities at Anixter is that I do sit on a number of technical standards committees, and we're typically developing new technology every 5 years. So if you think about the longevity of your infrastructure, you should really have it where it's going to last at least 15 years. So that means within the context of technology development, if you've got every 5 years something happening, you need to be able to survive at least 3 iterations of technology in your infrastructure. It's really difficult to have that foresight, but I think that's something you need as you evolve your technology plan across your environments. But that's something that's going to happen. And increasingly, more and more systems are going onto the network, because it's not just about data communications anymore. You have a lot of devices now that can also be powered through the network. So we have new standards like the IEEE Power over Ethernet standard. We're working on a new standard where we'll be able to deliver 100 watts to an appliance across your low voltage cabling system. So if you're using a single infrastructure now to power everything as well as communicate to your devices, it really takes a lot of careful planning to be able to do that. So this fourth utility concept, it sounds easy, but it's more difficult from an execution point of view. But this is something you really need to think about as you start planning your networks.
So a lot more capability on the horizon with connectivity in the campus. So Eric, maybe from a practical or realistic point of view, in the real world,
right.
How have you seen the network evolve on campus?
Well, an interesting thing happened. So we about 3 weeks ago had our reunion. We had all these alumni come back to campus. One of them came to me and another colleague, and he asked the question, so do you as a faculty member go down to your library and sit in there and read journals so you can demonstrate to students this is how you do research? And I you know, frankly, I wanted to laugh, but I was being polite as alumni. And I'm like, no. Actually, we go on our tablet and we look up the journal there, and we're visiting the library virtually. So you think about network, and you think about what's going on and talking about all the time, because this is happening at midnight, it's happening at noon, it's happening across the day, where the network has become a lot less wired, almost entirely wireless. You're talking about a lot of that's backbone, not even on your IT infrastructure, it's on the cell network, so DAS becomes really important. It's also very much not being used by white male type people. It's a very diverse population looking for different things and trying to connect disparate ideas across. Again, we're universities trying to figure out new ideas and where things are going, just really approaching them in new ways. So when we think about this, the student of tomorrow, we think about demographics that Lander was talking about, we've got to think about how do they want to do it. We were having dinner last night, and one of the things we discussed, you know, how much is our framework of where we're going changed by the fact of what we grew up with? You know, when I was growing up, they had just introduced the Apple IIe, right? And there was still this thing called a rotary phone. So I remember that, and there was there's some things that are intrinsic in how we work as a society. As Lander said with her young child, a great-grandchild.
Great-grandchild.
I'm going to try to say grandchild and be nice.
Yeah, no, you're being nice.
But they will have no idea what anything is other than smartphones. There's never been nothing but a smartphone in their life. So how does that reframe, so when it comes to network, and comes to this, the backbone that gets them all these things, there's going to be an expectation, not just reliability, but it's effusive, it's never limited by bandwidth, it's never in a situation where you have an oversaturation of an access point. That's what they want it everywhere, inside, outside, all around.
Eric, you bring up a good point. It's not about Wi-Fi and fiber or copper connectivity, it's about cellular connectivity today. So Andy, maybe we should comment on that, because at Anixter we're seeing a significant growth in distributed antenna systems.
Yes.
Show the room, anyone employing distributed antenna systems on campus? Quite a crowd, right? So can you just explain where that's heading?
Well, yeah, with a distributed antenna system, all it's really doing is extending the coverage of your cellular service provider. So in years past, it used to be the responsibility of the service provider, whether it's AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, to really provide kind of that coverage area within facilities. But increasingly, building owners in campus environments are really taking ownership of the coverage. And there's technology today that's carrier neutral, where irrespective of the type of carrier or who you're using as your carrier, you can basically use these distributed antenna systems to basically boost the signal into areas where you don't have very good coverage. But it really becomes a question, I mean, we're always on, always connected in the campus. There's an expectation that you have to be connected all the time. It really depends where you want to connect the students. Is it through Wi-Fi or through the cellular coverage? Because that's really kind of how you need to think about it. But there's really two distinct technologies that you have to look at. One is really on the public network, and the other is more on your private local area network.
So Deb, you do a lot of work in intelligent buildings, smart buildings, in the enterprise space, lots of good best practices we can learn and share with other industries. What advice have you got for the group?
Yeah, there's a lot of emerging technologies. Sigfox and LoRa, for example, are all coming into this space specifically to solve the problem of smart cities and smart buildings. But I think it's about getting that infrastructure right, and it's more about the network design and making sure that you're designing. And this actually comes back into that whole play on the risk. You have to realise that if we're going to connect billions of devices to the network, that's billions of vulnerability points for somebody to hack into your network. And there's been, a number of very high-profile cases, and I would think universities are probably at the highest challenge level there, because you've got the smartest people in the room coming through your environments, and they're going to experiment with every hacking capability possible. So it's about designing so that you're protecting your business layer, you're protecting your students from being able to access good internet, and it's about making sure that your business, which in this room is facilities, making sure that it's always up, always on, and that no one can hack across. So the best practices we're seeing is complete separation of base building networks.
Okay, very good. So that brings us to the customer, the student, with 128 votes here. These are my children, they're not my grandchildren. I'm a late breeder. That photo, they were 1.5. And we presented at the Building Owners and Managers Association. We presented the two astronauts there. And then we're able to show a photo of them a year later. And you talked about generation, whatever generation you mentioned.
Gen Z.
Gen Z. So this is the I generation. And the question I have is, how is the campus of the future being planned to cater for tomorrow's students, not just the next 5 years, but the next 2 decades? So specifically in terms of student experience in the classroom, recent studies have shown that the immense potential to improve outcomes in an active learning environment or non-traditional classrooms. In some cases, students in a traditional lecture course are 1.5 times more likely to fail compared to students in active learning environments. So Landa, how are the universities using technology to improve learning outcomes? And what role does technology play in the competition for students and faculty?
Well, the whole student experience it's transformational, frankly. What has been happening is that we've been thinking now, actually literally thinking about student success and what that means. And student success is no longer, from an institutional perspective, is I got your butt in that seat. It's now, did I keep it there? Did I actually help you to learn? Did I get you out the door and into a career? And a career that, quite frankly, is about lifelong learning. I mean, Don said it this morning in his remarks, is the world has changed. And it's changed so dramatically that we now need to think about a student experience that covers the gamut, that it's no longer finite pieces of information, that there's a sage on the stage, it's a guide on the side, and maybe it's a guide on the side forever. Because this idea of learning how to think, learning how to adapt, learning how to learn, helping every student plan for every future that they will have. As a matter of fact, there were some statistics on how this will impact the work environment, and that kids coming out of college today will have 17 jobs, 17, over 5 different industries. That's not the way we used to think about it. That's a world that's totally different. So take that now to the experience in the classroom. Is it in the classroom? I don't know. Is it in the cloud? I don't know. You know, so it's really a very different approach. And the technology is allowing us to do things at a lower and lower cost that we could never do before. And so you were able to come to our opening event and do some voting. Now, how did they get you to vote? A drink ticket. All right. I know. We know how to get you to vote. So you vote. Maybe that's what we should do for the entire elections. I don't know. You get a drink ticket if you'll vote in the national election. However, you voted, and the way in which you thought about it was totally different, right? It dropped in. It's a very, this whole experience has to be reimagined. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to do when it comes to using data and technology to rethink how we're taking it and deploying it.
Yep.
Okay? Yeah.
So Eric, let's profile these students, these customers of yours. How have they changed? What does it look like today?
Well, as I was saying earlier, much less male, much more female. You're seeing, if you look at college universities and women leaders, you're smiling, but it is critical to our future that these women are so engaged. It's awesome to see it. I mean, my best students, frankly, are typically women, not white males like me, which is exciting to me because but they're also diverse across, different categories of ethnicity, but diverse in thought, diverse in geography where they've come from, diverse in experiences, and often diverse in the fact they're not even on campus. So they're engaging with us remotely from their offices, from places they're working, their homes perhaps, and they're coming to us in different ways. And so and by the way, they're much more wired and engaged in technology than they've ever been before. And again, so they're using those tools and they want to use those tools in different ways. The one other big key difference is they no longer want to know what is happening or what you're teaching them. They want to know why you're doing it. And that why question, they're asking many more why questions. And I think it's exciting, it's challenging, but it is certainly worth exploring with them because then they can start getting into how they can help on those college campuses.
So new learning management systems, and how is technology helping that with the students you talked about?
Right, so say take Blackboard, or we have Moodle on our campus and so forth. Those are all key systems that allow video capture of lectures. But forget video capture, how about interactive learning gaming during class? I use Kahoot is one system I use to do online surveys with students in the classroom, out of the classroom, across the world. And so these learning management systems have to adapt to everything that's available to engage students in different ways. And yes, it sometimes is slide presentations or lecture notes or handwritten captures during class. Or, for instance, we actually reverse the classroom. We can actually flip it virtually, where we do a project, we have them do some stuff, videos, things like that offline, come to the classroom, and they're engaging their peers through the learning management system to some folks out in the industry or other partners that they might have that are teaching the class remotely. So these systems really need to be adaptable across the range of on and off campus and across different layers.
Yep. So the same goes for a smart building and intelligent building. It's all about the tenant, not the student, right? So Deb, what is the tenant looking for in a smart building, and how can that technology be translated into the campus?
So almost always our clients are the people that own and operate the buildings, but they are very much thinking exactly the same way that you're thinking with this slide, is how do we create a better experience? And it doesn't matter whether you're the owner of a shopping mall or a commercial building or a co-working space. The person that's in your building is now your customer, and it's about providing the best experience. And again, that comes back to using data to make decisions rather than waiting for humans to be inconvenienced and bubbling those problems up. It's about getting in front of those issues, understanding those problems before anybody's even noticed them, fixing those problems before they're inconveniencing your customer. So that's really, I guess, where I'd be coming from around the student experience. But it's definitely, I think, one of the key drivers for why people are adopting technology in buildings.
So that's the why. Talk to me more about the how. So I'm managing a facility. How's this technology going to help me with the efficiency of what I do and the cost models?
So, I mean, it's pretty simple for what we do. We look at first of all, we look at where the complaints are, and we try and address the complaints. And if you look at almost every organisation that's got some sort of help desk ticket where they're collecting issues coming out of buildings, 25% of all of those complaints will be, I'm too hot or I'm too cold. So if you can just address that, you're straight away addressing, you know, the major problem, and that's a pretty simple one to solve, really, because everybody has. If you haven't got a building management system that's got, you know, space and comfort, temperature sensing, you at least can get hold of, you know, cost-effective sensors. Putting an analytics layer over that and being able to detect those problems is going to, you know, reduce the number of complaints that you have significantly.
So that raises a good point. As we talk about this room full of facilities people, we do a lot of business on the IT side of the fence. So maybe we'll have another impromptu survey. I cannot give you a beer or a drink, but a show of hands, who uses a ticketing system to deal with problems of your faculty and your students? Significant, wow. Excellent. So what we see when we see OT and IT collaborate more together, the best practices from IT are shared with OT, and IT are very good at that workflow and work order system approach. So Andy, on this checklist here, we're talking about a bunch of things that students care about. Can you share with us some, how would you rank some of these areas and from what you're hearing?
Well, getting back to the wireless discussion, you say cellular and wireless coverage. I mean, coverage is certainly important. So if you look at some of the new technologies coming at it, it's being developed at a pretty rapid pace. If you look at the IEEE standards, there's new 802.11 standards being developed like every year. So we're at a point where we're at like the third or fourth generation of Wi-Fi now, where we can get up to almost a gigabit of data rate now dedicated to a client. So that's a tremendous amount of bandwidth that you can get, but you know, coverage and capacity is really what you need to look at, because people not only want good coverage, but they want to be able to, you know, access whatever activity they want to do. So if they want to stream video or stream music or get access to, you know, course content, they want to be able to do that very quickly. So capacity and coverage is very important. And again, you have to segment it between your Wi-Fi systems and your cellular systems. So getting to cellular, we're on the cusp of this new technology called 5G, which will get you much more capacity. They're talking gigabit data rates and very low latency. So they're talking 1 millisecond latency across a cellular network, which is outstanding. That's almost real time in terms of your ability to transfer data across a wide network. So again, you got to look at your environment and really have some foresight in terms of how you plan that. So getting back to kind of the non-wireless technologies, you've got things like professional AV, you've got security technologies. These are all hitting the network. So really what you need to look at is, what is your migration strategy? Because these technologies are also evolving very quickly. So if we take security as an example, it wasn't that long ago that we had cameras with 3 sets of wires going to the camera. You had one coaxial cable for your video. You had one serial cable for your pan-tilt zoom control. Then you had 18-gauge 2-conductor wire for your power. That's 3 separate cables, completely siloed from everything else, to where we're at today, where you have one Ethernet cable going to your camera that gives you pan-tilt zoom control, video, and power, you know? So from that perspective, you need to start looking at how do you plan for the future. In many ways, technology is getting more complex, but from a deployment perspective, it's getting actually simpler because you have less systems you have to provision. Ethernet is your protocol now that you can basically send information across anywhere and have scale. You have to really think in those terms because the AV technologies are evolving in that direction as well. You have new technologies like SDVOE, which is software-defined video over Ethernet, where now I can send very high-resolution 4K video streams across the network to any type of appliance I want across the network. So you need to start thinking in those terms.
I think physically things are getting easier for integration, but from the data transport layer, it's not much better.
Yeah, and because it is so it's so disparate right now.
Exactly.
But you have to kind of look at what is your migration path, migration strategy. Because I agree, there's some technologies that are quite mature, like security, which is getting to that point. But when you're talking like building management systems and these other types of subsystems,
Even all these new sensors. I mean, that's going to be the next wave of innovation. Is how do these systems all talk?
Yeah, and I think the plumbing piece of it is still working out, and I think. You know, the trend is towards Ethernet, but it's not there yet. I totally agree with Deb in that regard.
So the interesting dynamic here is that some people may be in the room looking at this and saying, this is not my job, that's IT, that belongs to the AV people. But the new world is, we talk about the Internet of Things, we talk about the connectivity of things, and that's also the collaboration of things, and we're going to hit on IoT at the end, but I think this chart here is something you can do as a self-awareness of your own space. We're going to share all these slides with you. But Landa, maybe you're commenting because we were talking about this the other day. Everybody, it's not my job, or it is my job. Whose responsibility is all this stuff? Well, maybe Eric.
Oh yeah, and so that's back to the collaboration piece. And when we talk about the facilities professional, that whole job is changing. We've looked at moving from hiring mechanics to hiring technicians, right? A very different look and feel of the roles. With the skills gap, we're in the middle of that. So you connect the IT, you must be collaborating across those. If you don't already have it as the fourth utility in your organization, maybe you need to be there. But IT with OT, information technology, operational technology, the facilities department, the information department, it's just got to happen. You can no longer operate without having that bridging. And the roles in which you play are so critical. And you've got, with skills gaps, it's even worse, I think, in trying to hire the right people, et cetera. So.
Yeah, and going back to risk management, if you're not doing that, you're assuming a heck of a lot of risk. That's a huge risk you're taking, not trying to figure out how to integrate those things, make them work together. And ultimately, going back to the topic at hand, that's going to have a negative impact on your student experience. So you really want to go back and think about how you can go out, reach out, and get your hands around that risk and manage that risk effectively instead of kind of doing the old, Heisman, push it off, stiff arm. You want to embrace that and figure out how to make it work. Otherwise, you're assuming the risk that could really hurt you down the road.
So going back to something closer to home, perhaps in real estate, space utilization got a lot of votes, 85 votes for this area as a #1 campus priority. The reality is only 50% of new higher education construction is for academic purposes. So Landa, talk to me about what are these other spaces and how are they adapting?
Well, part of the problem is just how we use our space, period. It's a space use and a space type issue. From a space use standpoint, the statistic is that 47% is our utilization rate. That's nuts. With funding shortfalls, with enrollment either down, tuition up, and tuition discounting is now at 48.6%. It's not sustainable, is my point. So when we look at space type then, you're dealing with some legacy buildings and legacy systems that really need to be rethought in terms of meeting pedagogy. Norm, you and I talked about this. Pedagogy, the type of space you need to do, the kind of learning that our students are looking for. You know, that it's the wrong space for the wrong purpose. And so instead of saying, I'm just stuck with this, I think there's some ideas in terms of the use of technology. Deb, you and I were talking about this, or we were on the phone talking about this, about the sensors and the use of data may actually be more of it there than we had really imagined that we can utilize to transform what we already have.
Right. So Eric, let's get into some examples, and not just the space types, but who's responsible? Who are the stakeholders now sharing this space and the responsibility of the space?
One of the biggest challenges you have in space utilization is people like me, i.e. faculty. Trying to get them, not that we're horrible people and we're the ones doing the primary educational, you know, we're the educators, but getting us to think differently, incentivizing and engaging on us different things, and building expectations. So really this is where you've got to, again, go out and reach out to your educator colleagues, your faculty, and say, how can we help you do things better? Here are some new things, here are some new ways, here's some pedagogical methods, and so on, and really engage them in a way. Because to make space utilization work, you've got to help them understand you can do what you've done. It doesn't have to be on a chalkboard anymore. I mean, and there's still faculty doing that. You probably know them. But there's other ways to do it that's just as effective or even more effective for the learner out there. So, you know, to make the spaces work better, start talking to them, and they're a key stakeholder for this.
So Andy, we, again, in intelligent buildings with space utilization, huge topic. What's happening with network densities and in all these different spaces, and what's going on, and how's the network wired or wireless? How does it have to change to support a changing environment?
Well, I think there's a realization, especially in the structured cabling industry, which is essentially the guys that are putting in all the network plumbing, so to speak, for these facilities, that different environments have very different needs. So if you look at a commercial building application, when you're provisioning technology, it's pretty straightforward. You have, a couple outlets per workspace. You're running backbone cabling to support those environments. What we've done over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years within the industry is really create more application-specific standards. So one of the organizations I mentioned earlier, which is the TIA, the Telecommunications Industry Association, they're based right up here in Arlington. They're developing all the wiring standards for primarily North America, but these standards are certainly used globally. And what they've done is they've taken some of the application-specific requirements of these different environments. So the different environments that they're looking at are things like data centers, there's healthcare facilities, and now there's a standard for educational facilities. So it's called the TIA 4966. And what they've done is they've taken a look at these environments and really are trying to provision the right technology to meet the need. So they define various environments within campus and educational facilities. So they're looking at faculty areas, staff offices, collaborative spaces, technical rooms, non-academic facilities, et cetera. And what they're doing is they're provisioning the right amount of plumbing, so to speak, to service that room. So the earlier example I had with the office space where you're provisioning 2 to 4 outlets, it could be a dozen outlets now because you've got much more technology within that room. But at least there's guidance within the industry, and it's evolving to kind of adapt to the needs of the different environments that are out there.
So Deb, if we look at one thing is to cater for the space for our customer, the student, but then again, how can we manage the space? So information is power, knowing what's going on in your space versus gut feel. Yep. I looked at a dashboard the other day and it showed me portfolio usage across many buildings and then usage within a building. Can you talk about how technology is providing that data for facilities?
First of all, so space utilization is such a key driver for why people are adopting these technologies. And the reason is there's so much experimentation going on around how to re-provision buildings and create better, different, more innovative, more collaborative, more productive space. And because it's a lot of experimentation, people actually don't know if that works or not. If you think the pace of change is fast in technology, have a look at what's happening in space. When I talk about workspace, and And if you go into, old enterprise and you see those cubicle farms and you imagine that your students are going to want to work in those environments, they're just not. They're going to leave those companies in droves and go to the companies that have these amazing workspaces. And most enterprises have woken up to this for two reasons. One, they want to attract the talent. But two, they're actually under pressure. The pace of innovation is happening so quickly, and you get those Kodak moments, and every enterprise is thinking, how are we going to stay relevant? How are we going to stay on top of our game? So that's about attracting the best talent, retaining the best talent. But then once you've got that talent, it's about creating workspace that allows them to be their most productive, their most collaborative, and therefore their most innovative. And that's the only way the enterprise is going to win. So that is all about workspace. So we're actually seeing this new thing, workspace as a service, because most big enterprises realize, well, they don't have the in-house skills to be able to re-provision their space to be workspace of the future. So we're seeing some really innovative kind of business models coming in where companies are taking that workspace off the enterprise, re-provisioning it, and then giving it back to them as workspace as a service. We do a lot of work with WeWork. Has everybody here heard of WeWork? It's one of the fastest co-working companies on the planet. They're opening 10 sites a month globally. And so they've already in planning for the next 200 locations, and they're basing the design of those 200 locations on the last 200 that they just opened, but they don't have the data yet to know whether those 200 actually are doing the job that they needed to do. So everybody's trying to get ahead of this in terms of sensoring for seats, sensoring for desks, sensoring in cameras to understand where are people congregating. Are they congregating there for social reasons, or are they working together? Is the workspace, and it's all about getting that data out and being able to analyse that data.
So it's a big topic that we can talk about that for an hour,
sorry,
right?
it's a bit of a long-winded answer there.
Great. But no, it's really important. You guys voted. This is important to you. So this next one, I didn't put the number of votes up there because there's only 34, and I think it's because it looks like it says clot enablement versus IoT. So I'm not sure who misunderstood this, but it should be a lot higher. So this is sort of why we're here today to talk about IoT. So in some ways, bringing everything we've talked about together, enabling the campus Internet of Things allows you to analyze your environment and make real-time adjustments to improve productivity and efficiency. That's the why, right? So what we tried to do with all our environments, Eric, at Anixter is to define the 5 senses of a smart building, if you like. And the way we describe that here is the best practices for environmental monitoring, visual management, communication enablement, security integration, and network connectivity. You bring those ingredients and best practices together, you're in a good place. Give us some, where would I start an IoT project if which area would I start?
I'm gonna punt, not really. It depends, right? We have to understand our context. And that's really important. We need to know ourselves to know where to start, because that is what's going to drive best. It could be environmental monitoring. That could be the area to help make sure, back to the hot and cold calls that Deb was bringing up earlier, what are we doing to really engage in ways to make it more comfortable and more effective for those learning environments? Or it could be something different. And so, for instance, we're in Clarkson, we're into hockey. 2-time national championship in women's hockey the last 2 years. Go Golden Knights. And the women, amazing. But for them, it's something different in terms of thinking about our context. That's a really important part of us. So maybe for us, it's actually more about the network connectivity in those spaces, so that people can be in those spaces doing the things they need to do, both as athletes and student athletes, and being effective that way. So what makes sense for you is going to really depend upon your context and what your assets are. You shouldn't try to fight against what you've got to some extent. You've got to take that and make it better. So what is that context, and how do you move forward? And it may be something very different than someone else who may say, hey, visual management is really important for them to be able to start tracking what's going on within their digital signage and the way there's messaging and so forth. That may be very important for them. So you got to find yourself and use that context to your advantage.
So you're heading up the informatics at APA. And that's one job of your many jobs.
One of my many jobs.
But when you're back at Clarkson, how real is the IoT discussion, and what are people looking for in your world?
So it's evolving. We're really looking at, as we think about the space, how do we engage in that? One of the first parts we started with is we actually got, our facility staff hired 5 computer science students this summer to engage in rewriting programs. So we went right to environmental monitoring and started going, God bless Siemens for being our partner. But we really worked with them, and they are, within a month, they had rewritten so many programs, found in one building 20% energy savings just by virtue of looking at sequencing, looking at sequence operation, improving the coding to get rid of some sequences that were going bad and finding some Phoenix valves are open, and solving some of those problems. So it was engaging the students in a way that was really rich for them, as well as helping us in the institution.
So, Andy, we work for the same boss. We've been given a bonus plan this year and the last few years around IoT. And so you're invested,
around
right?
IoT, that's right.
So why don't you share with everybody in the room what you're learning from a greater industry point of view around IoT and how it can help their environment?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about IoT, it means a lot to a lot of different people. When you say that term, it's pretty broad, but the way I look at it, there's kind of a cultural issue you need to address within your organization as far as how OT and IT systems, kind of operate with one another. And then there's a technical piece, which, quite frankly, a lot of the technology is already out there, especially on the transport side, and as far as getting data from point A to point B. But really, from a cultural perspective, you really need to define, and Eric already alluded to it, is what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? What is your goal? Because that's really what IoT, the promise of IoT, is there to do. So if your outcome or goal is to reduce energy consumption by 20%, what is the technology that I need to provision to get there? If I have a loss prevention issue, I want to reduce theft by 20%. From a security point of view, what is the technology that I need to provision there? So once you have defined the outcome, the goal, the next challenge is really to kind of get that partnership, and Lander already talked about it, that partnership between operational side and the IT side, because as we said earlier, the technology is increasingly going onto the network. The ability to share information in real time is literally there for many subsystems. You can share information on security data very quickly. So from that point of view, having that collaboration and partnership with kind of your facilities and IT team is really critical to really having a successful project. But once you have kind of that buy-in across both sides that, hey, I want to achieve 20% reduction, now what is the technology that I need to provision? So from a technology perspective, as it relates to IoT, there's really 3 challenges. Is, okay, how do I get the information? What is the data that I'm trying to extract? How do I normalize the data? Because as we talked about earlier, the data comes in many different formats. It gets transported differently. The formatting is differently. So how do I normalize that data so I can use it? And the last piece is, okay, how do I analyze that data so I can have a useful outcome from it? So becoming more proactive in how I use the information. So really that's kind of it sounds simple, but the execution, it takes some thought to put into it. But really those are the key challenges, both from a technical and a cultural point of view within your organization.
Yeah, so from a cultural point of view, if there's one thing you're going to take away from this session is collaboration. So Lander, you talk about people and process. So without being repetitive, let's talk about this again. This is a slide showing that there's different groups and different stakeholders from faculty, administration, information technologies, facilities. What's the solution with IoT, with collaboration?
The solution, he says. Yeah, if I had that, well, yeah. I'm not sure I have it, but frankly, when you think about collaboration, there's some really good material on what real collaboration is. Arbinger Institute does a great job on this thing called outward mindset in terms of actually being present, seeing beyond yourself and seeing others' perspectives and using that information. Either I'm part of the problem or I'm part of the solution. Can I actually think about, instead of the question being, what problems have I solved today? I'm actually asking, what problems have I caused today that I might actually then open my mind to a set of perspectives that are different than mine, and I can adjust where I'm going. And that's going to take, with what's happening, I see it as the speed of change, with the speed of technology, the speed of learning at the speed of now, which means we have to be able to communicate in a way that is quick, responsive, but also reflective of all of the perspectives that need to be brought to the table. And it means we need to, and I always have a saying when it comes to HR, when dealing with people, slow is fast. Well, it sounds a little weird, slow is fast, because people need to be brought along, and with the exponential change that's happening right now, we are caught in a world in which we almost can't even adapt. We don't get it. We don't understand. And the word adapt is the right word. So we need to adapt to new collaborative models and to new ways of thinking about how we deliver our services. It's no longer just about us. It's about the whole enterprise-wide. Yep. And I think the technology gives us such a great opportunity to present things quicker, faster, fact-based, evidence-based decision-making, and that really ought to help all of us move the needle with the institution.
That's some great advice. So Deb, from your point of view, you've been working on this project the last 10 years. What's your final comments on the IoT topic?
Well, I think for a start, there's a lot of people sitting on the sidelines thinking, oh, wow, IoT, no, I'm not going to do that this year. It's too hard, and taking that leap. But if you look around your organization, you're probably already got, 20, 25, 30 systems all with different logins. Yep. You just don't want to perpetuate that. So if you start with the end in mind and think about what does the end look like in 10 years or 15 years? I mean, that's not the end, but it's probably the end of, this next phase of technology. And if you think about that, then you're looking for, there's no silver bullets here. It's about coming up with the right strategy. So it's getting the right infrastructure in place, like we were talking about earlier with getting that network right, and then thinking about all of the different layers that you're going to layer on top of that solution, and they all have to work with each other. They all have to be open and have collaborative data exchange and even interoperability with controls. So if you think about that, and then any one of those pieces has to be able to be replaced. If you find a better camera next year or a better, CO2 sensors, you have to be able to replace any aspect of that solution and maintain the integrity of the rest of it. So if you start with that in mind, you've already got the building blocks to get started on this thing. You can take what you've already got and you can make a start on that. And it's about coming up with the collaboration actually goes beyond that pie chart. It actually goes to your vendors. You have to find partners in your vendors who are going to work in that collaborative environment and come into it fully knowing that they have to all work with each other. And if you can create that kind of ecosystem, I think you'll actually have a highly successful outcome. And just going back to the skills shortage, there's an enormous skills shortage in this area. It's going to be one of the most fascinating, interesting careers for your students that are coming through. And can I please hire those people?
Yes. Yeah, you would love to do so.
Yeah, because there's just not enough people who have this cross-section of AV, security, IT, controls, energy. We need all of that in one person. And so we tend to pick people that have got one thing and then teach them the rest. But I mean, I think it's an enormous opportunity for your organizations as educators. Everyone talks about the automation and how these jobs are going, but this is actually one industry where there's going to be an enormous number of jobs created.
Sounds like a role for APA.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Informatics. So if you want to start your IoT journey, it shouldn't be that scary. Come to stand 400 and we'll teach you how to do that after the V, but little lab there. But everything we talked about is not all about technology, like we talk about collaboration. And 78 of you voted for project deployment. And what does that mean to you? And from Anixter, we agree with that. Anixter says that projects should save time, reduce costs, increase efficiency, and mitigate risk. So we've got some models here. So maybe for Eric, share an example where a project deployment has been a challenge and maybe what you would have done differently in that space.
So at one part of my lifetime, I was the chief engineer, or engineer division chief at Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall, right here near Arlington, Virginia. It's the military base that surrounds Arlington Cemetery. And the military, U.S. Army, decided to adopt an SAP-based system called GFEBS to run and operate all of its backbone, run its facility management, so your IWMS was in that. It had, as well as all your financial systems and so forth. Well, the biggest mistake they made is never talk to a facility person before they began. And as a consequence, since it was really a SAP backbone and had a lot of great financial management, sales management, and some of those capabilities, it really didn't understand how projects could get done, how you manage your maintenance workflow, all those things. So I think the thing I would have done differently, and we ended up having to do ex post facto, was really get in a room with some people and walk through and do that wire diagram for how does things get done. And then with you understanding that, how would you do that better? And then deploying the technology to do that. So understanding yourself, understanding where you want to go, the goal in mind has been brought up, and then executing the project based upon knowing that and moving forward and doing it in a timely manner. You can't hold back. You got to really engage on that.
I mean, good examples. So we are on time, but maybe over budget, I'm not sure. 3 minutes to go, we'll be catching up on the presidency. So we have an opportunity. We've got some mics around the room. We can open this up now for some Q&A for our panelists on any of the 5 topics we've talked about today. You're all shy like Lander, right? Okay, on that note, maybe some final comments from the panel. Lander, starting with you. Closing comments?
Lander or Andy?
Either.
Well, I could start. I guess we talked a lot about technology, but I think, as we alluded to, find the right partner. You should really leverage your partner network as much as you can. Technology is evolving quickly. So, find ones that are flexible, find ones that are knowledgeable on, the shifts in technology. I think, that's really the main advice I would give, because there's a lot of education that you'll have to do, kind of on your own to kind of create an IoT plan or project that's going to work for you.
I think my closing comments would be, we have to introduce a culture of risk. So we're all quite risk averse, and particularly in procurement. And if you're going to be innovative and creative and really stretch the boundaries, you have to have an element of, it's okay to have some things fail. If you're going to do some experimentation, you just need to mitigate how big that failure can be. But that's how we really stretch the boundaries and really become that organisation of the future. It's experimenting with new things and knowing that not everything is going to work out.
Mm-hmm. So I think my final comment would be, remember, we're supposed to be learning institutions. And so we need to have the wherewithal as facilities professionals to reach out to those students and faculty, bring them into this with us, and make it a people-driven thing so that we can all learn together effectively. I love Deb's comment. She wants to hire my people. Now we got to talk later and we'll figure that out. But really, this is an untapped resource in many locations. So some are, and then we've had several sessions on this, but it gives an opportunity for everyone to learn going forward, but also get the better performing institutions we all want. So you really drive towards that so that we can build this brighter future together. If we don't do that, then we're really missing out, and we're going to be continuing to get stuck in some ruts that we don't want to be. So think about the people, think about reaching out, and it may not be easy. They may not want to come with you, but try to woo them together, because the physical places that we are, or the virtual places that we are, connect everybody. So you're oftentimes the glue as a facility professional to make that work.
Mine would be a couple. One is to share risk. We don't even know what the risk tolerance is at our institutions if we're the ones just holding on to it. If we're not sharing that risk at the highest levels of the institution and having those folks assist in making those decisions and actually make those decisions, because then they're part of the decision, makes a huge difference. And the second part is learn. Learn, learn, learn. You went to school who knows when? Well, guess what? That's all over. 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. That means the students graduate with whatever they learned in the last 3 years has all of a sudden been reinvented, right? And so it's critical in our field that we continuously learn. Lifelong learning is the last comment I'll make about all of it.
Excellent. So we're really lucky to have such great panelists today. Can you join me in thanking them for their valuable insight?
Good job. Good job.
And on that note, we'll close this session and wish you well on your IoT journey. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'd like to thank our panelists one more time, Steve, Deb, Eric, Andrew, and Lander, for your insight and your conversations this morning. One more round of applause for them, please. So our exhibit hall is now open. Remember to take advantage of what our supportive business partners have to offer. And then we do have a very full afternoon of more educational breakout sessions, including ones that are offered from 4 to 5. Make sure you stick around for them. I'm not just saying that because mine's one of them. As a reminder, your feedback is critical to the success of the future programming for our conferences. So please do take a moment in Guidebook and rate those sessions. You just click on the individual sessions in your agenda, and you can rate them on a 5-star scale. Hopefully all of your sessions this afternoon are 5 stars. Have a great day.